Good morning. I'm thinking that we are recording now. I am Judy Watters. Thank you for stopping in. And I'm looking forward to this time together. And we are off. Are we recording, Mar? Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so I am Judy Watters. I'm a freelance writer and editor, teacher of writing, and author of 17 books. Hello, John. How are you? Nice you stopped in.
Hello.
Hello, hello, hello. I think so far it's just you and me, John. And we're going to really get to work here in just a second. So I'm going to share my screen. The title of this presentation, of course, is, oh dear, lost it. The 5 essential elements of a great story. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen and I tried this before and now it's not working. Okay, here we go. All right, very good. We're good to go. All right, so the 5 essential things of a great story. Every story, we need to stop and think, what causes you to read a story? Is it entertainment? Like for me, one of my old go-to books for comedy is Irma Bombeck's The Grass is Always Greener Over the Septic Tank. We look at books for entertainment, whether it's to fulfill some kind of humor, to get us out of a funk, and we want something uplifting, maybe clarity on an issue, like Stephen King's On Writing, or Your Pain is Not a Waste. This is a story by a cancer patient who wanted to get her story out there, not only for other cancer patients, but also for the support system, because sometimes the support system really doesn't know how to be a good support. So this is a co-written book by Grace or by Delia and by her husband too. Also, we go into adventure. We want to escape reality, especially now in 2020. We want to escape reality. So other books that are out there by James Patterson or by Tom Clancy, or, when we think about what we want to put into our books, we have to consider, why do people read books? Why would people want to come and read my book? One thing we have to keep in mind is that we as authors write books because of a subject that we love, something we want to write. And yet, if we ever want to sell our books, we have to write what the reader is looking for. So melding those two is the perfect match, to have something that you're enjoying in your writing process, but yet someone's going to really be interested in reading it too. So the 5 essential elements theme, the main idea, every book has a theme, whether it's Cinderella, Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, whatever the book is, there's a major theme. We're going to be talking about character, setting, point of view, and plot, because all of it rolled in together makes for that great story. So let's look at some of the conflicts in the world today, not only today, but forever. There's man versus nature, man versus man, man versus society, man versus yourself. And as we go through this, you'll be able to remember back at some of the books that you've read that bring this idea to mind. We have man versus fate, the gods, man versus the unknown, E.T., man versus technology. We have always, there are a lot of books now and past that have been written on man versus technology. Examples of themes. So let's take a look at this. The theme of love. Love won, love lost. That is such a popular theme. So we have Romeo and Juliet, Pride and Prejudice, or death. Death is a huge, there are lots and lots of books out there on death. And And you think so many books are written on each of these topics, and yet it's the uniqueness of how you write. They say there's nothing new under the sun, but it's how you write the story that makes the difference. Good versus evil. You think of Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia, or Coming of Age. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith is an awesome book about growing up in Brooklyn, and it's huge. It's huge, but it's a great read of a girl coming of age. Power and Corruption. From the very beginning of writing books, this has been a huge, and there's just recently in our political world, we've had a lot of books that have been written on power and corruption. But think about Animal Farm, Hunger Games, all of these, they have to have a theme. Survival, Lord of the Flies, Life of Pi. Two characters in that whole story. I think it was a tiger and the boy, Life of Pi, but it was a story of survival. Courage and Heroism, Robin Hood, even the children's book, Robin Hood. Prejudice, To Kill a Mockingbird. Every high school student has to read that. And it's a beautiful story of prejudice. And then also Harper Lee wrote a follow-up to that. How to Set a Watchman was her second book that, I don't know, there's controversy as to whether she really wrote it or not, but it came out just a few years ago about how what's her name? Scout went back to Macomb to confront her father on prejudice. It's a great story. Individual versus Society, 1984, Fahrenheit 451, where they're burning all the books. And war. How many books are out there on war? Thousands of books on war. And yet again, it's how you write the book, how you write that story centered around that theme that will be unique to your reader. Next is characters. All right, when we get into characters, your reader has to either love your character or love to hate your character. You can either write it from the viewpoint of the good guy or the bad guy. Now, most books are from the good guy's point of view, but your reader has to relate to your character. So before you even start, write out these characters. I've written 3 memoirs, but I had to write out my father's characteristics, my mother's characteristics, because I know them as the author. I knew what they were like, but I had to make sure that that my reader would get to know them. Physical personality traits. Are you writing, the antagonist? You have to write someone who they're going to really like. The protagonist is the person they like. The antagonist is the guy that's against the protagonist. And when you write about these conflicting points of view or desires or goals, when you're writing up, putting them together, that character has to be right on. So the character development is important for that. Then, of course, there's always a good idea to have a dramatic foil in there. You think of Romeo and Juliet. There was a foil who kept asking Romeo, are you sure you want to do this? Or, yeah, we need to go get that guy. There's a couple dramatic foils in there that would always be that little guy on Romeo's shoulder to egg him on or pull him back. Then, is your character round, flat, static, or dynamic? I could do a whole seminar on this, but a round character shows all different personalities. As human beings, we normally have a lot of different sides to us. We can be happy, we can be sad, we can be moody, whatever. But then there's that flat character, like I have to go back to Romeo and Juliet because I taught it for so many years. But in Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet, he was a flat character because he was always that's Tybalt. Tybalt always wanted to fight. He was ready to fight all the time. You never saw him, moody or anything like that. He was just ready to fight whoever came along. Static and dynamic. Does your character stay with the same thought throughout, or do they change at the end of the story? Are they a really, really sweet guy at the beginning of the story, and then at the end they're angry, or vice versa? What changes in your character? Their thought processes, emotions, likes, dislikes. As the author, you have to know what your character likes, what makes them angry, what makes them respond in a positive or in a negative way. Even small characteristics of favorite colors might lead to your reader getting to know your character just a little bit more. And then what's your character's goal or motivation? I think of all these different books. I put different ones here, but your character's goal, motivation in The Elf. You know, we've all seen that movie or read that story, and The Elf in New York City. You know, what's that goal? What motivates the person? And is your character balanced? We can't make our character the goody-goody of it with no flaws. Our character has to have human flaws, or it's not real. It wouldn't be realistic if a character had only good characteristics. Does a character have both an internal and external conflict? Are they struggling inside their brain as to what to do, and while that external conflict is out there too? The character's backstory really needs to be built as the story goes on. You've read probably some stories where the character or the writer just brings out, and it's called a mind dump. It's just a dump when they tell you the whole backstory at one time. Backstory needs to be intertwined as you're writing that story. A little snippet of that backstory as you go. And there have been books I've read where I've gotten all the way to the end of the book and I realized I don't even know what this guy looks like. Did he have brown hair? Did he have black hair? Is he short? Is he chubby? Is he, is he brawny? I didn't know. And so things like that, you need to bring that out to both physical, mental, how are they thinking, what's their thought process, as well as their physical. But to come out and say, Johnny has long black hair that he pulls back in a ponytail, that's one of those information dumps that you want to stay away from. You have to build it in and intertwine it with your story. What about distinctive mannerisms, both good and bad? Does he cough up phlegm all the time? Does he have a nervous twitch? Does his eye kind of have a little tick there? Is he constantly coughing, whether he needs to or not? Those little nervous mannerisms that your character might have. Is your character believable? And that's your biggest character development mistake, is to make a character that is not believable. This goody-goody character who never has any flaw. Romeo's flaw. I mean, he was, he had to do things real quick. He didn't stop and think things through. Juliet the same way. And I'm sure you can find a lot of different stories in the same way. Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, they were always getting into trouble. But it was those little character flaws in them that were big there, but they also had some good sides to them too. So the reader got to really love both of them. I'm gonna move that over. Okay. All right, so then we're moving on to setting. Setting has to be almost a part of your characters. It has to be another character. Setting is built in. You can't have a good flowing story if your setting is not well defined And when I say well defined, it needs to again be interweaved into your story. Location, time period, significant sites, surrounding nature, the weather, local customs. Think about, maybe To Kill a Mockingbird. All right, if you take that was written and set like in the 1950s in the United States, you take that story and you put it in modern day, or I'd say 2019 setting, New York City. 2020 is crazy, so I wouldn't set it in 2020, but in 2019, what we're used to know as, New York City being really coming and going and really popping, take that setting and put it there, and it's a totally different story, totally different. So time period has a lot to do with it. Private Peaceful, World War I, that setting, it has to be in that setting because you had all that poisonous gas that was used and all. So the setting is so important with this. Local customs. There was The Witness that was set in Amish country. And that story would be so different if it was set anywhere else but Amish country. The setting is not an afterthought. There's a lot of writing on here. It has to have a purpose. So again, we intertwine, use the description of setting throughout your story. And be specific. Don't say the car came racing down the road. Tell me what that car looks like. Was it a Corvette? Was it a 57 Chevy? What, is it all beat up? Does it show that it's been in car races or street races or whatever? When we talk about the flower, it's not just the flower. She picked a bouquet of flowers. That doesn't really give us a whole lot of setting. She may have picked a bouquet of beautiful red roses that grew up the side of the house, and you're creating the setting by telling about the flowers that she picked for her mom. Or the house. You can take a house setting and go back to some of the Stephen King descriptions of a house. That'd be so totally different than what I described in my memoir of my house. So be real specific, and it tells you about time periods too, as you describe these different things. The use of similes, metaphors, personification. The car sounded like the roaring ocean, I don't know, personification. Senses like sight, sound, smell, taste, a feel in the scenery. I go back to Private Peaceful, and when the gas had been exploded around them, that sight and the sound and the smell, and to get all of that down in descriptive words will help your reader, pull your reader into your story. This is also a portion of don't tell. You have to show them by using what's going on around them, the setting, when I wrote about my father, who grew up in a Jewish orphanage in New York City back in the early 1900s, I had to show what all that was about and the feel of it. Had to talk about the setting as far as the loneliness, even though there's 2,000 children all around you, the loneliness that he had to have felt. Instead of saying it's raining, you could say his shoes were soggy, drenched, and he was, which put him in a bad mood, whatever. Because the setting actually does, as I go into the next one, the setting actually does affect the character's mood. It can make a person happy, it can make them angry. So it has to be interweaved into the story. No huge information dump. It has to come slowly. So I put three different pictures here. When you think about the setting, here's a business meeting. Looks like a business meeting here, maybe. And so to describe that business meeting, you're going to have to talk about or discuss how maybe it's a husband and wife, maybe they're business partners, and he's leaning forward and trying to get his point across while she's trying to get her point across. Or again, how would you describe this picture here of two little children who just lost their mother? You can tell from the picture, if you have the picture, you can tell that it's old by the way they're dressed. So to be able to do that without a picture, you need to talk about the clothing and talk about their mindset, maybe the old farm and how it was falling apart. Same way here down in this bottom picture. That setting, how would you describe that setting if you didn't have the picture? An old farmhouse, doing, the plowing, the raking of the hay in the old-fashioned way. How do you do that? Point of view is our next one. Who's going to tell the story? Think about it. And I have these different Little Red Riding Hood. These are called fractured fairy tales. And anyone can do this because Little Red Riding Hood, all these nursery stories are free game in the public realm, public domain. But someone has taken Little Red Riding Hood and retold it in the wolf's point of view. So using a different point of view is going to give you a totally different story. So this one is, honestly, Red Riding Hood was rotten, told by the wolf. Here's Rapunzel, the original story, which is told in third person. And then we have really, Rapunzel needed a haircut. So it depends on who's telling the story as to how that comes across. Here we have examples of first or second point of view. I don't know if you've read Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell. And here's an example of first person singular. There must have been about 2 minutes during which I assumed that I was killed. Obviously, it's first person singular. It's going to be about him. He uses a first person pronoun, I. Second person. Very seldom do you find a book written in second person, but it does kind of bring in that reader to be right in you, becomes you almost. You get home to your apartment on West 12th Street. It's a wreck like you. No kidding. You wonder if Amanda will ever explain her desertion. This is a bright lights, big city. But it's using you, yours to tell the story, which sometimes gets a little much. And I have known, somebody had, I think it was an author that I worked with her on her first book, and she wanted to do it in second person, and she got almost like a quarter through the book and decided, it was too hard to keep it in that second person point of view. Third person point of view. I don't know if I can say most, but a lot of books are written third person omniscient. Omniscient is all-knowing. You know everybody's point of view. You know what everyone is thinking. You know all the action that's going on. It's an outside person. The family of Dashwood had long been settled in Sussex. Their estate was talking about, so it's third person pronouns. Their estate was large and their residence was at north. Now this sentence will tell you that it's an older book because nowadays sentences have shortened, but their estate was large and their residence was at Norland Park in the center of their property, where for many generations they had lived in so respectable a manner as to engage the general good opinion of their surrounding acquaintance. Today we have a shortened time that we can really pay attention. So sentences have gotten shorter over the years. Not to say some people still don't write in those long sentences, but okay, we're not going there. Third person. This is third person pronouns. Now that's omniscient. Now, third person limited, we talk about, I love the book, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, written by Thurber. Walter Mitty is aging. I don't know if you've read Walter Mitty, but he's an aging guy. He's kind of losing it. And he does a lot of living in his inner thoughts. All right, here's an uninvolved third person. Wrong lane, Mac, said the parking lot attendant, looking at Mitty closely. Gee, yeah, muttered Mitty. He began cautiously to back out of the lane marked exit only. Leave her sit there, said the attendant. I'll put her away. Mitty got out of the car. Hey, better leave the key. Oh, said Mitty, handing the man the ignition key. The attendant vaulted into the car, backed it up with insolent skill, and put it where it belonged. Now, that last sentence tells you that's what Mitty is thinking. Walter Mitty is thinking he vaulted into the car. He backed it up with insolent skill. So as you go through the book, he becomes a famous doctor in his mind. He lives out all these scenarios. And so it's third person limited because you see only Mitty's thoughts. But there's also an uninvolved third person in there that's telling you what's going on in real life. When you get into the limited, you're only finding out what Walter Mitty is dreaming about. So at one time he's a doctor, another time he's an ace pilot flying over Germany in World War II, and he's going to, win the war for everybody. So he has all these different little, so it's a great book on character development too. All right, plot. What is the story goal? Where are you headed? And some people will say, I don't know where I'm headed until I get there. You start writing the book and you know what you want to write about, but you're not really sure how it's going to end. And the story just unfolds. If you're a writer like that, you are a pantser. In other words, you are writing by the seat of your pants. And there are many, many people who do that. But if you have to have everything laid out and you have all of your chapters outlined, you have a goal, you know how it's going to start, you know the middle, you know the end, then you're an outliner. You have to have that outliner. You are going to focus on each separate part of it, as opposed to just putting pen to paper and writing away to your heart's content. In writing your plot, we need to know about your consequences. There has to be a consequence. There has to be action in it. What is the problem? There is a problem to every story. There has to be requirements in here. What's going to be required of your character to do? Also some forewarnings. Maybe you've seen some mystery programs on TV, and you can pick up on the nuances in the first 5-10 minutes. I know when I'm sitting there watching different mysteries, I'll say, oh, I know who killed them right away. I know what's going to happen. I know who's going to die, because there are all these forewarnings. And then I think, why can't I write like that? I want to write like that. But to give forewarnings all along the way helps your reader to expect and to foresee things in the future. What are the costs to your character? What is this going to cost your character if he decides to jump out of the life raft and save his buddy who's drowning? What's the cost to him? What's the dividend? What does he get out of it if he's successful? Using concrete events throughout is so important. And then bringing that action to the climax. This next slide will show it better. Here's your plot diagram. You start with your introduction of characters and setting, and yet, even though you're doing that introduction, you're still introducing all the way up. There are individual happenings as you go along. This happens, and so you learn a little more about your character. And this happens, and so you learn a little more about your character. Every step of the way, you're learning about the character, you're learning about the setting, you're learning how it all goes, it wraps in together until you get to the climax. And then from there on, it's all falling action and right down to your resolution or your denouement, as they call it in France, your denouement. So that's your plot diagram, and every story follows that. Every adventure story, every love story, every fiction will follow this. So I think I went through this really, really fast, but your whole goal in writing a story is to create an emotional journey. Using a narrative arc, that plot diagram I just showed you, we have to make our readers laugh. We have to make them cry. We have to make them angry. We have to make them frustrated. A Man Called Ove is a great book for character development. This is an old crotchety guy who hates everything. But as we read through, we understand why he's so crotchety. We understand what his goal is in life, and we understand why the young girl comes alongside him and wants to help him, and really does eventually. But that's a great, now I love the book. I gave it to my 98-year-old mom to read, and she couldn't get through the first chapter. She says, he's just too mean. He's too crotchety. I don't like him. So she didn't have that connection with him, so she wouldn't read the rest. Then Where the Crawdads Sing is a fairly recent story. I think it may have come out within the last 5 years, but this develops, I can't remember the name of the girl that's the main, I don't remember the main character, but her character development is just, it's amazing. It's spot on because she's a child who's left all by herself to grow up by herself. And it takes her through all these different steps of character development and having to look out for herself in the cold, cruel world. But those two stories are really good to look at if you want a character study, character development. Okay, wow. I think I went really, really fast on this, but we'll have time for questions, John, if you have any questions. Of course, my last slide, the best place to start is with the first word. And don't stop until you write the end, okay? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And John, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and we can just have a question answer time.
I don't have any questions for you, but it was interesting. I would make a comment though about your primarily talking about books and like novels and stuff. The writing that I have mostly done as far as storytelling is in very short stories like flash fiction, and so the stories as they end up being written don't have a lot of that descriptive detail about characters and setting and all that stuff. But I always imagine those things and think, okay, what is this character like? You know, what type of person is, and sometimes I write notes about things that don't actually get, because I'm trying, I think, you know, you got to think of what the setting is and all this stuff because otherwise the story doesn't develop unless it has to be there, even if it's not specifically stated out. But, you know, that's I try to follow those kinds of things that you're talking about, you know, and I'm, but it's just you have to imagine these things, or you're just putting. a character that doesn't seem real or what.
Right.
And I know, and I usually start out saying I don't have any idea. I'm getting to know the character. I'm getting to know the setting as if I'm going somewhere in time or space or something and seeing all this. And that's why the writing process is fun for me as much as reading a book or something like that. So.
You know, John, Amazon has Amazon Ignite. Are you familiar with Amazon Ignite?
I've never really looked at it. I just.
Okay, so you can publish a story that's 1 page or a story that's 100 pages. And Amazon Ignite is all based on the length of time a person will read. It takes a person. So there are 15-minute reads, 30-minute reads, 45-minute reads, an hour reads. And writing that short story is quite challenging because you do have to bring everything in to even the short story. And you might go to Amazon Ignite and you just call that up, go to Amazon Ignite, and there's so many different stories people have put up there. They're $1.99, 99 cents, something like that, but they're really short. And there's a friend of mine, David Carnahan, who has written several on Amazon Ignite, and he does action stories, but he does them like in 6 pages. And he gets all that character development in there. He gets all of the, it's amazing. He's a great writer, but you might look him up, David Carnahan, on Amazon Ignite. But yeah, when you're writing short stories are a lot harder to write than a whole novel because you do have to get all that action in. You have to be able to pull that reader in right at the very beginning and then be able to keep them to the end. So, and I think you write poetry too, right, John?
Yes, that's and for me personally, getting into writing, whether it was writing haiku, writing or writing the short stories, it's always started from a personal need, a therapeutic purpose for me, you know, so my first purpose is writing for me, and then I only secondly think about whether somebody else would want to read, you know.
Yes,
and so,
yes.
but the writing process is a way of me processing my thoughts and my emotions and me dealing with complexities of life, you know. And I'm doing more of that with poetry right now, but a few years back I was doing that with stories. Something I didn't like something about society, and I think, well, what would, if you let me process that, and I write a story and it helps me think about it and process. So it's been a therapeutic for me. But some of the things that I've written, other people have enjoyed, and so I'm glad when other people get something out of it too, even if they're getting something out different than I am. But I always start with what's in it for me and my drive, you know. But I like stories, and they come to mind, but the process of writing, you know, is something that's been very helpful for me, kind of mentally, and so.
That's good. You know, I work with cancer patients writing through their journey through cancer, and I've lately been helping some people write haikus because in that 5-7-5 syllable format, your first 2 lines have to be one thought process, and then your third line is supposed to be a complete opposite. So we can allow the cancer patient especially to think about the anger, the frustration, the depression and all in those first 2 lines, right, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and then they have to force themselves to think of something positive in that third line, because the third line is a total opposite of what their thought process was in the first 2 lines. So the cancer patients have really enjoyed doing that because it does get them out of their funk, you know, and be able to see things in a different light. So that's very helpful. Haikus, I love doing haikus. But,
I started writing haiku while I was recovering from cancer surgery. Yeah. So,
Ah, there you
I mean,
go.
I think I had experimented with it in some when I was trying different kinds of poetry at a time before, but I just seriously thought to do it when I needed something peaceful to, and then started
Yes,
with haiku, and it was
yeah.
interesting. So
I mean, yeah, you
I
can force,
relate to what you were saying about that.
yeah, as a cancer patient, I mean, you can force yourself to say, okay, I'm just going to be positive. I'm going to look at this positive, for the first 2 lines. That's a lot of positivity there. And then, okay, what do I really feel today? And end with it. Sometimes they've wanted to do it that way too. So it's all together, whatever is meaningful to you. So, well, thank you, John, for being here today. Thank
And
you.
Judy, I had a couple other questions for you just to kind of get the ball rolling a little bit. So for a beginning author who is just writing their first book and they're wanting to write a great story using your tips, what would you say are a few of the biggest pitfalls that they might encounter in that first book?
Be yourself. Don't try to be the Stephen Kings of the world. Don't try to be, the next Tom Clancy. You need to be yourself and write. Just, I tell, especially cancer patients, I tell them to vomit on paper because they usually can relate to that. Vomit on paper, get it all out. Don't edit yourself. Don't go back and edit all the time. You have to get the basic story out, get it all done, write the end, and then go back and edit. You know that there's going to be places, you're going to have spots that, I'm writing a middle school boys book right now, adventure book. And I know, and I remember when I wrote the first chapter, I had him in 8th grade. Well, farther down in chapter 24, 25, now I'm writing 6th grade. And I'm saying, no, wait. This is something, I've got to go back and make sure all the way through he is, thinking in an 8th grader's brain, not a 6th grader's brain. So you have to be consistent with it. And if Marley was short and chubby in the first chapter, he better have problems climbing up the tree house in the 10th chapter because he's out of wind or whatever, so there are those little things that you have to go back and edit for. But I would say you edit. My first book, when I thought I was all done, I was so excited and so proud of it. I sent it off to a professional editor and she sent me 15 pages of corrections. I mean, I said, no, wait, this is a perfect book. It's not perfect. It's never perfect, actually. But yeah, be open to other people's comments too, would be another one. I would say for a beginning writer, a critique group is priceless. Get involved with a critique group. Go to your local library and see if they have other local authors around, or maybe there's, like I lead a critique group at the Bulverde Library every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock, and we get together and we critique each other's pieces. So find a critique group. Look for beta readers. You can go to Goodreads and look for free beta readers who will read your book, and free of charge, and just because they like to read, and they'll tell you. They will tell you where you've had a problem that you didn't quite understand between chapter 2 and 3, what happened, something like that. So, good question.
Another one, I know every writer who's written for any amount of time has experienced writer's block at one point or another. Do you have any major pointers that you have that kind of help, keep you going in those moments?
Yeah, I don't, because I talk so much, I don't think I've ever had a whole lot of writer's block, but I would suggest you go outside and you write about the first thing that comes to mind. I'm looking out my window now. I could go out there and write about the first bird that comes to the feeder, or you just get writing about anything. Write about the tree and how it leans to one way or the other. Write about how one tree is losing its leaves faster than the other, or it's dying, or whatever. And as you start writing, more thoughts will come. Or you can use, go online and look for a quote on piece, or a quote on happiness, whatever. And from there, you start writing for that. Another thing that I like to do is I look at the national days, like National Taco Day, and write about my favorite taco, you know, just to get your brain moving and the writing juices flowing, more or less. Write idiotic stuff, and that'll get you out of your funk. Another one?
Well, thank you, Judy. That's all I've got for you. It's been wonderful. And for everybody else, we'll be posting this on our Facebook, and that'll be available all through the rest of the week.
Good. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mara.
Bye.